Welcome to Story Tales. Please like this video and subscribe to Story Tales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. Knox Mercer stripped off his bloodstained scrubs and tossed them into the laundry bin. 24 hours. That's how long he'd been on his feet, stitching wounds, stopping bleeding, watching people cling to life by threads thinner than the sutures he used to hold them together. Hell of a shift, Dr. Martinez said, walking past the break room. That highway pileup was brutal. Knox nodded, exhaustion weighing on his shoulders like a lead blanket. 3 fatalities. 2 kids who'd make it home to their parents. 1 grandmother who wouldn't. Numbers. That's all they were now after 15 years in emergency medicine. He pulled his phone from his locker. The screen showed 6:47 p.m. Lorna had texted him that morning about dinner plans, something about her parents and their anniversary. Knox's fingers moved across the screen. On my way home, he waited. Usually, Lorna responded within minutes. The 3 dots that showed she was typing never appeared. Knox pocketed the phone and grabbed his jacket. Maybe she was cooking. Maybe she was busy with her mother's latest drama. The parking garage smelled like exhaust and rain. Knox's truck sat where he'd left it yesterday morning, covered in a thin layer of Colorado dust. He climbed in, started the engine, and pulled out onto the wet streets of Colorado Springs. Home was 20 minutes away in good traffic. Knox had bought the place 3 years ago, a small house in a decent neighborhood with a view of the mountains. Lorna had wanted something bigger, something in the area where her parents lived, but Knox's salary had limits. Even with overtime, emergency nursing didn't make anyone rich. The radio droned about traffic and weather. Knox turned it off. The silence felt better. He thought about the grandmother from earlier, how her family had gathered around her bed, holding her hand as she slipped away. Peaceful, surrounded by people who loved her. When had he last held Lorna's hand? Knox pulled into his driveway and sat for a moment, staring at the house. Lights were on in the living room. Lorna's car was there, parked in her usual spot. Everything looked normal. He walked to the front door, keys in hand. The brass key slid into the lock and turned. Nothing. Knox frowned, tried again. The key went in, but wouldn't turn. He examined it in the porch light. Same key he'd used for 3 years. Same lock he'd installed himself. What the hell? Knox tried the deadbolt key. Same result. He knocked on the door, first gently, then harder. Lorna? Lorna, my key's not working. Silence. Knox walked around to the back door. Locked. The windows were closed, curtains drawn. He could see the blue glow of the television through the living room curtains. His phone buzzed. A text message, but not from Lorna. From Cynthia Whitmore, we need $20,000 for our anniversary trip. Lorna said you'd handle it. Hope this isn't a problem. Knox stared at the message. $20,000. For a trip. He made decent money, but $20,000 wasn't pocket change. And why was Cynthia texting him about it instead of Lorna? Knox called Lorna's number. It went straight to voicemail. Lorna, it's me. My key doesn't work. Call me back. He walked back to the front door and knocked again, harder this time. Lorna, I know you're in there. What's going on? A neighbor's dog started barking. Knox looked around, suddenly aware that he was standing on his own doorstep like a stranger, like someone who didn't belong. Knox sat in his truck, watching the house. The porch light was on. The living room light was on. The upstairs bathroom light came on at 8:30, then went off 20 minutes later. Normal bedtime routine. His phone sat silent on the dashboard. 8:10 p.m. Knox tried calling again. Voicemail. 18 midnight. He texted, "We need to talk." No response. The temperature dropped. Knox ran the truck's heater when he got too cold, but he didn't want to waste gas. He had to work tomorrow. Another double shift, probably. The ER was always short-staffed. Knox dozed sometime after 1 a.m., his head against the cold window. The sound of the front door opening woke him. He checked his phone. 2:17 a.m. Lorna stood in the doorway wearing her pink pajamas and robe. She held a plastic container in one hand. Knox got out of the truck, his joints stiff from sleeping in the cramped space. She walked halfway down the path and stopped. Knox approached slowly, like he was dealing with a trauma patient who might bolt. Lorna. She held out the container. Knox looked down at it. Leftover Chinese food from the place she liked. The container was cold, Like it had been sitting in the refrigerator for days. The yellow sticky note was attached to the lid. For dinner. Knox took the container. Lorna turned and walked back toward the house. Wait, Knox said. What's going on? Why won't my key work? Lorna stopped at the door, but didn't turn around. Lorna, talk to me. We're married. We live here together. You can't just. The door closed. Knox heard the deadbolt slide into place. Knox stood there holding the cold container of leftover food. The sticky note fluttered in the wind. He walked back to his truck, set the container on the passenger seat, and climbed in. The food smelled like stale soy sauce and defeat. Knox didn't sleep. At 7 a.m., he drove to the bank where he and Lorna had their joint checking account. The same account where his paychecks were deposited. The same account Lorna used to pay for her shopping trips and spa days. I need to make some changes to this account, Knox told the teller. What kind of changes, Mr. Mercer? Close it. Transfer everything to a new individual account. The teller, a young woman with kind eyes, looked concerned. Is everything all right? You and Mrs. Mercer have had this account for quite a while. Everything's fine, Knox said. I just need to make some changes. The balance was $4,847.32. Not much, but it was his money. Every dollar came from his work, his overtime, his expertise keeping people alive when their bodies wanted to give up. Knox transferred the full amount to a new account in his name only. He left exactly $0.00 in the joint account. Next stop, the phone company. Knox paid the bill and removed Lorna from the plan. Her phone would stop working by the end of the day. Then the utility companies. Electric, gas, water, trash. All in his name. All canceled effective immediately. Last was the landlord. Knox had insisted on signing the lease himself 3 years ago. Lorna had wanted her father to co-sign, but Knox had his pride. He'd never asked anyone for anything, and he wasn't starting then. I'm exercising the 30-day termination clause, Knox told Mr. Peterson over the phone. But Knox, is everything okay? You've been a great tenant. Everything's fine. I just need to make a change. Well, if you're sure, I'll need you to come by and sign some paperwork. Knox drove back to the house one last time. His truck looked out of place in the driveway now, like a repo man's vehicle. He used his garage door opener that still worked and parked inside. Knox packed methodically. Clothes, books, his collection of medical journals. The coffee maker Lorna never used because she preferred the expensive machine her parents had bought her. His shaving kit, his tools, the stupid ceramic mug Zia had given him for Christmas 3 years ago. Everything fit in the truck easily. Knox had never owned much. Growing up in foster care taught him not to get attached to things. He was loading the last box when his phone buzzed from, Lorna, where are you? You can't just leave. Knox read the message twice. Then he typed back, key doesn't work, remember? He hit send, got his truck, and drove away. Zia Harmon lived in a small apartment near the hospital. The place was a mess of computer equipment, empty energy drink cans, and pizza boxes, but it had a pull-out couch and Zia didn't ask questions. Knox had called him from the truck. I need a place to crash for a few days. What happened to the palace with the princess? Zia asked, but he gave Knox the address without hesitation. Now Knox sat on the couch, eating microwave pizza while Zia played some video game involving zombies and automatic weapons. So let me get this straight, Zia said, not taking his eyes off the screen. You come home from a 24-hour shift where you literally saved lives and your own wife locks you out of your own house. That about sums it up. Zia paused the game and turned to face Knox. Dude, you realize this is insane, right? Like, actually crazy person behavior. Knox nodded. I know. And her mother texts you asking for 20 grand like you're some kind of personal ATM. Yeah. And when you try to talk to Lorna about it, she gives you leftover Chinese food and slams the door in your face. Pretty much. Zia shook his head. Man, that family was a whole cult. You were the supply, not the husband. Knox had suspected it for months. The way Cynthia talked about him when she thought he couldn't hear. The nurse. Like his job was something embarrassing. The way Kellen made jokes about Knox's truck, his clothes, his education. The way Lorna never defended him. What's your plan? Zia asked. Knox took a bite of pizza. Don't know yet. But that wasn't true. Knox was already thinking. Already calculating. The foster system had taught him to survive. The ER had taught him to stay calm under pressure. And 15 years of marriage to Lorna had taught him exactly how her family operated. They thought he was weak. They thought he would beg, cry, apologize for things he hadn't done. They thought wrong. 3 days later, Zia bounced into the apartment with a grin that meant trouble. I did something. Knox looked up from his book. What kind of something? Remember how I set up Lorna's email account on her laptop last year? Fixed that virus she got from clicking on those shopping links. Yeah. Well, I might have kept access. For security purposes. Knox stared at him. You been reading her email? Not reading. Just monitoring. For your protection. Zia sat down at his computer. Want to see what your loving wife has been up to? Knox hesitated. Part of him didn't want to know. But another part, the part that had learned to expect the worst from people, needed to see. Show me. Zia's fingers flew across the keyboard. Hotel receipts. Lots of them. Always the same hotel. Always room service for two. Always charged to her daddy's credit card. The screen filled with email confirmations. The Grand Vista Hotel. Room 412. Every Tuesday and Thursday for the past 3 months. There's more, Zia said. Credit card statements for a gym membership she doesn't use. Spa appointment she canceled. And then there's this guy. A new email thread appeared. The sender was listed as W. Temple that can't wait to see you Thursday. Rooms booked. With a red thing. Knox's jaw tightened. Guy's name is Wes Temple, Zia continued. Owns some gym downtown. Looks like a walking bicep with 3 child support cases pending. The emails went back months. Dozens of them. Some explicit. Some just planning meetings. All of them proving that Knox's marriage had been over long before his key stopped working. I'm going to copy all of this, Knox said. Already done. Screenshots, printouts, the works. Zia handed him a flash drive. Everything's on here. Knox pocketed the drive. His hands were steady. His voice was calm. But inside, something cold and sharp was taking shape. Knox had $5,000 in his new bank account. Not much, but enough to get started. He found a vacant commercial space on the south side of town, a former auto repair shop with good bones and cheap rent. The owner, Mrs. Chun, showed him around. What kind of business? She asked. Medical training facility. First aid, trauma care, CPR certification. That kind of thing. She nodded approvingly. Good. Helpful. You do good work. You pay rent on time. We get along fine. Knox signed a 6-month lease that afternoon. The space needed work. Knox spent his days off cleaning, painting, setting up basic equipment. He used his savings carefully, buying used mannequins for CPR training, basic medical supplies, folding chairs. Word spread quickly through the hospital. Knox had a reputation, steady hands, cool head, 15 years of saving lives. When nurses and EMTs heard he was starting a training center, they paid attention. You teaching trauma response? Asked Jake, one of the paramedics. My cert expires next month. That's the plan. Sign me up. Your classes will actually be worth something. Knox started small. Basic CPR classes on weekends. First aid for office workers. Stop the bleed courses for teachers. $25 per person, cash only. Meanwhile, Lorna's world was falling apart. The utilities had been shut off the day after Knox left. The landlord had served her with eviction papers. Her phone had stopped working. Knox heard about it through Zia, who heard about it through the hospital gossip network. She's staying with her parents, Zia reported. Cynthia's telling everyone you abandoned them. Says you left poor Lorna with nothing. Knox said nothing. Let them talk. Talk was all they had. Knox was restocking first aid supplies when someone knocked on the door of his training center. He looked up to see a woman with short brown hair and kind eyes. Knox. Knox Mercer. He stood slowly. The face was familiar, older but recognizable. Ariana, Wynn smiled. I can't believe it's really you. I heard through the grapevine that you were starting something here. Knox had known Ari in the foster home. She was 2 years younger, smart and fierce, and determined to make something of herself. They'd lost touch after aging out of the system. I work with the county now, Ari said, looking around the space. Social services. I specialize in helping men who are dealing with difficult domestic situations. Knox invited her to sit. They caught up her education, her work, his career, his marriage. When Knox got to the part about the locked door and the cold leftovers, Ari's expression hardened. "I've seen this pattern before," she said. "Financial abuse, emotional manipulation, isolation. They push you out slowly until you had no choice but to leave. I left because my key didn't work. You left because they made it impossible to stay." Ari leaned forward. "Knox, you don't need to burn their house down. Just own the land under it." Knox looked at her. "What do you mean? You said the lease was in your name. Utilities in your name. Bank account in your name. They threw you out of your own home. That's illegal. So you have rights. Legal rights. And more than that, you have evidence of what they've done to you." Ari stood up. "I know some lawyers who specialize in this kind of thing." Interested, Knox thought about Lorna's emails to West Temple, about Cynthia's demand for $20,000, about Kellen's smug face the last time he called Knox to help. "Yeah," Knox said. "I'm interested." Attorney Rebecca Kane had an office downtown in an old brick building. She was in her 50s, gray-haired, with the kind of steady confidence that came from winning cases. Knox sat across from her desk while she reviewed the documents he'd brought. The lease agreement, the bank statements, the email printouts, photos of the changed locks. "This is straightforward wrongful eviction," she said. "Your name is on the lease, but they changed the locks without notice and denied you access. That's illegal regardless of your marital status. What can we do about it?" Kane smiled. "Quite a lot. We can sue for wrongful eviction, emotional distress, loss of personal property, and given the evidence of infidelity." She tapped the emails. "We might have grounds for alienation of affection." Knox didn't know what that meant, but it sounded expensive for Lorna's family. "I want to send them a letter first," Kane continued. "Give them a chance to make this right before we file suit. Sometimes the threat of legal action is enough." "What kind of letter?" Kane turned to her computer and started typing. When she finished, she handed Knox a printout. "To the Whitmore family. This office represents Knox Mercer in regards to his wrongful eviction from the property at 1247 Pine Street, Colorado Springs, CO 80907. On March 15th, Mr. Mercer returned from work to find the locks changed and access denied to his legal residence. This action constitutes wrongful eviction under Colorado LAW. A.S. the sole leaseholder and financially responsible party for said property. Mr. Mercer has the right to immediate access and occupancy. Failure to restore his access within 7 days of receipt of this letter will result in formal litigation. Damages being sought include, but are not limited to, wrongful eviction penalties, emotional distress, loss of personal property, legal fees, and punitive damages. Additionally, evidence has come to light regarding potential fraud and financial manipulation. These matters will be addressed in subsequent legal action, though we expect your full cooperation in resolving this matter. Sincerely, Rebecca Kane, attorney at Law Knox. Read it twice. "How much will this cost?" "My consultation fee is $500. If we go to court, 30% of whatever we win. If we don't win, you owe me nothing more." Knox wrote the check. Kane sealed the letter in an envelope and handed it to him. "Want me to deliver this personally?" Knox asked. Kane shook her head. "Certified mail. Let the Postal Service do the work. More official that way." The Whitmore family received the letter on a Thursday. By Friday afternoon, Cynthia was on the warpath. Knox was teaching a CPR class when his phone started buzzing. He ignored it until the class ended, then checked his messages. 17 missed calls from Cynthia. 5 from Kellen. 3 from a number he didn't recognize. The voicemails were interesting. Cynthia, first message. "Knox, what is this nonsense? Some lawyer sending us threatening letters? Call me immediately." Cynthia, third message. "You're being ridiculous. Lorna made a mistake, but this legal stuff is unnecessary. We can work this out like adults." Cynthia, seventh message. "You ungrateful." The message cut off there. Kellen's messages were different. Colder. More calculating. "Knox, this is Kellen. We need to talk. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Call me." Knox didn't call back. Saturday morning, Kellen showed up at the training center. Knox was setting up for a first aid class when he heard the knock. Kellen stood in the doorway wearing his usual expensive suit and condescending smile. "Nice place," Kellen said, looking around. Very modest. What do you want, Kellen? To talk. Man to man. About this situation with Lorna. Knox crossed his arms. What situation is that? Come on, Knox. Don't be naive. Marriages have problems. People work through them. But this legal action? It's beneath you. Is it? Kellen stepped inside, uninvited. Let's be practical. You want back in a house? Fine. Lorna will give you a key. You want an apology? She'll apologize. But drop this lawsuit. Knox stared at him. You think this is about getting back together? Isn't it? No, Kellen. This is about what you people did to me. What you thought you could get away with. Kellen's friendly facade cracked. Listen, nurse. You're playing with people who have resources. Real resources. Lawyers who cost more than you make in a year. You won't go that route. I already have a lawyer. Some storefront attorney who takes cases for spare change? Please. Kellen pulled out his phone. I'm calling my lawyer right now. We'll bury you in paperwork and legal fees until you give up. Knox walked to the door and held it open. Get out. You're making a mistake. I made lots of mistakes. Marrying your daughter was one of them. Believing your family's lies was another. But this isn't a mistake. Kellen left, but not before stopping at the threshold. This isn't over. Knox closed the door behind him and turned the lock. Through the window, he watched Kellen get into his Mercedes and drive away. An hour later, Wes Temple showed up. Knox recognized him from the photo Zia had found online. 6'2", heavily muscled, the kind of guy who wore tank tops to show off his arms. He walked into the training center like he owned it. You Knox? Yeah. We need to talk. About what? Wes flexed his shoulders, trying to look intimidating. About you backing off. Lorna's going through a tough time. She doesn't need you making things worse. Knox almost laughed. And you're here to protect her? I'm here to tell you to drop this legal bullshit. Move on. Find someone else. Interesting. You're telling me to find someone else, but you're sleeping with my wife. Wes's face darkened. Careful, man. You don't know who you're messing with. Knox stepped closer. Wes had muscle, but Knox had 15 years of dealing with violent drunk people in the ER. He knew how to handle himself. Actually, I know exactly who you are. Wes Temple, owner of Temple Fitness. 3 child support cases pending. 2 restraining orders from ex-wives. You live off wealthy women because you can't make it on your own. Wes blinked, surprised that Knox knew so much. Now, Knox continued, you're going to leave my business. If you come back, I'll call the police. And all those emails you sent to my wife? My lawyer has copies. Think about that. Wes started to say something, then thought better of it. He backed toward the door. This isn't over, he said. Yeah, your buddy Kellen said the same thing. Original bunch, aren't you? Wes left. Knox waited 10 minutes, then called Kane's office. They're rattled, he told her. Sending people to intimidate me. Good, Kane said. Desperate people make mistakes. Keep documenting everything. If they contact you again, record it if you can. Knox hung up and went back to preparing for his class. His hands were steady. His mind was clear. Let them come. He was ready. The courtroom in downtown Colorado Springs was smaller than Knox had expected. Wood paneling, fluorescent lights, American flags flanking the judge's bench. Knox arrived 30 minutes early, wearing the one suit he owned, a navy blue off-the-rack special he'd bought for his wedding. Rebecca Kane was already there, organizing files at the plaintiff's table. How do you feel? She asked. Ready. Good. Remember, stay calm. Let me do the talking unless I ask you a direct question. Don't react to anything they say. Knox nodded. He'd been preparing for this moment for 6 weeks. Every sleepless night, every humiliation, every unanswered text had led to this room. 8:15, the Whitmore family arrived. Lorna came first, wearing a black dress that made her look like she was attending a funeral. Her eyes were red, her makeup slight and careful, the look of a victim. Cynthia followed, overdressed as usual in an expensive suit and too much jewelry. She clutched an oversized handbag like it contained ammunition. Kellen came last, his attorney beside him. The lawyer was everything Knox expected: silver hair, $1,000 suit, briefcase worth more than Knox's truck. Lorna glanced at Knox as she sat down. For a moment, their eyes met. Knox saw something to regret, maybe, or fear. Then she looked away. All rise. The Honorable Judge Patricia Hendricks presiding. Judge Hendricks was a thin woman in her 60s with gray hair and sharp eyes. She settled behind the bench and opened the case file. This is Knox Mercer versus Lorna Whitmore and family. Case number CV 2025-1847. Wrongful eviction and damages. She looked up. Ms. Kane, you may proceed. Kane stood up. Thank you, Your Honor. This case is about a simple but serious violation of tenant rights. Mr. Mercer, who was the sole leaseholder of the property in question, was illegally evicted by the defendants without notice or legal procedure. She moved to the evidence table. On March 15, 2025, Mr. Mercer returned home from a 24-hour shift at Presbyterian Hospital, where he works as a trauma nurse. He found the locks changed and was denied access to his home. Kane displayed photographs of the changed locks, the lease agreement with Knox's signature, utility bills in his name. Mr. Mercer was not behind on rent. He had not violated any terms of his lease. The defendants changed the locks purely to deny him access to his legal residence. Kellen's attorney, David Sterling, objected. Your Honor, this was a domestic dispute between husband and wife. Property rights in marriage. Mr. Sterling, Judge Hendricks interrupted. The lease is in Mr. Mercer's name alone. Marital status doesn't negate tenant rights. Objection overruled. Continue, Ms. Kane. Kane smiled. Furthermore, Your Honor, the defendants compounded this wrongful eviction with a pattern of financial manipulation and emotional abuse. She handed the judge a stack of documents. Bank records showing Mrs. Whitmore's mother demanding $20,000 from Mr. Mercer. Cell phone records showing his attempts to contact his wife were ignored. Email evidence showing Mrs. Whitmore was engaged in an extramarital affair while denying her husband access to his home. Sterling stood up. Objection. The affair allegations are irrelevant to the eviction claim. Your Honor, Kane responded, the affair is relevant because it shows motive. Mrs. Whitmore wanted her husband out of the house to continue her relationship with Mr. Wesley Temple. I'll allow it. Mr. Temple has been subpoenaed as a witness, I believe. Yes, Your Honor. Judge Hendricks nodded. Call your first witness, Ms. Kane. I call Knox Mercer to the stand. Knox stood and walked to the witness stand. The bailiff swore him in. Kane approached with her legal pad. Mr. Mercer, please tell the court about the evening of March 15th. Knox spoke clearly, without emotion. He described the 24-hour shift, coming home exhausted, finding his key didn't work. He talked about waiting in the cold, receiving the text from Cynthia about the $20,000, getting leftover food at 2 a.m. How did you feel when your wife handed you that container? Kane asked, like a stranger, like someone who didn't belong there. What did you do next? I closed our bank accounts, canceled the utilities, and terminated the lease. Everything was in my name. If they didn't want me there, I wasn't going to pay for them to live there. Sterling cross-examined Knox for 20 minutes, trying to paint him as vindictive and controlling. Knox answered every question calmly, sticking to facts. Isn't it true, Mr. Mercer, that you were unhappy in your marriage? I was unhappy with being locked out of my own home. You took all the money from your joint account. I took the money I earned from my job. You left your wife with nothing. I left my wife the same way she left me. Locked out. Next, Kane called Wes Temple to the stand. Wes looked uncomfortable in his cheap suit. He tried to avoid the subpoena, but Kane's process server had found him at his gym. Mr. Temple, what is your relationship with Mrs. Whitmore? Wes glanced at Sterling, who nodded slightly. We're friends. Kane displayed printouts of the hotel emails. Are these your emails to Mrs. Whitmore? Wes squirmed. I might have sent some messages. Mr. Temple, you're under oath. Are these your emails or not? Yeah, okay, those are mine. And when you wrote, can't wait to see you Thursday. Rooms booked. With a red thing, what were you referring to? Sterling objected, but Judge Hendricks overruled him. We were seeing each other. While she was married to Mr. Mercer. Yes. And these hotel visits began when? I don't remember exactly. Kane showed him a calendar. According to the hotel records, your first visit was January 8th. 3 months before Mr. Mercer was evicted. Is that correct? If you say so. Kane was done with him. Sterling tried to rehabilitate Wes on cross-examination, but the damage was done. Lorna took the stand next. She'd been crying real tears, Knox noticed, not the fake ones she used when she wanted something. Mrs. Whitmore, Sterling began gently. Please tell the court about your marriage to Mr. Mercer. Knox's was a good man, but we grew apart. We stopped talking. I felt lonely. And did that loneliness lead you to seek companionship elsewhere? Yes. I'm not proud of it, but yes. And the decision to change the locks? Was that your idea? Lorna glanced at her parents. My mother thought it would be best. She said Knox needed time to think about what he really wanted. Kane's cross-examination was surgical. Mrs. Whitmore, on March 15th, when your husband came home from a 24-hour shift to the hospital, did you speak to him? No. Did you explain why his key didn't work? No. Did you let him inside his own home? No. But you did give him leftover Chinese food at 2 a.m. Lorna's voice was barely a whisper. Yes. And during the 3 months you were meeting Mr. Temple at hotels, did you tell your husband about the affair? No. Did you ask for a divorce? No. You just changed the locks and hoped he would disappear. It wasn't like that. What was it like, Mrs. Whitmore? Lorna started crying harder. I don't know. I was confused. I made mistakes. Judge Hendricks called a 15-minute recess. Knox stepped outside the courtroom and called Zia. How's it going? Zia asked. Better than expected. Wes folded like a house of cards. Lorna's falling apart on the stand. And her parents, they haven't testified yet, but they're looking worried. Good. Hey, Knox. Whatever happens, I'm proud of you. You're handling this like a champion. Knox smiled. Thanks. I better get back in there. The afternoon session focused on damages. Kane called character witnesses Knox's supervisor at the hospital, colleagues who testified to his professionalism and reliability. She presented evidence of Knox's emotional distress, his forced relocation, the costs of starting over. Sterling tried to argue that Knox's actions were vindictive, that he had overreacted to a marital problem. But the evidence was overwhelming. Judge Hendricks asked both sides for closing arguments. Kane was brilliant. She summarized the case clearly. Knox had been illegally evicted from his own home, betrayed by his wife, manipulated by her family. He was entitled to justice. Sterling did his best, arguing that emotions had run high, that both sides had made mistakes. But he had little to work with. Judge Hendricks retired to her chambers. Knox and Kane waited in the hallway. How long? Knox asked. Could be 20 minutes, could be 2 hours. Depends on how complicated she thinks the damages are. It was 47 minutes. The bailiff called everyone back into the courtroom. In the matter of Mercer versus Whitmore, Judge Hendricks began, I find in favor of the plaintiff on all counts. Knox felt something loosen in his chest. The defendants wrongfully evicted Mr. Mercer from his legal residence. This court awards him $15,000 in damages, plus legal fees, plus punitive damages of $5,000 for the emotional distress caused by the defendant's actions. She looked directly at Lorna. Mrs. Whitmore, you have 48 hours to vacate the property and return possession to Mr. Mercer. Failure to comply will result in additional penalties. The gavel came down. Knox had one. Knox drove to the house alone. Kane had offered to come with him, but he wanted to do this himself. That Lorna's car was in the driveway. The utilities were back on. She must have paid to have them reconnected. Knox parked and walked to the front door. This time his key worked. The house looked the same but felt different. Smaller somehow. Knox walked through the rooms, remembering. The kitchen where they'd eaten breakfast in silence. The living room where she'd watched television while he worked double shifts. The bedroom where they'd slept like strangers. Knox. He turned. Lorna stood in the doorway, wearing jeans and an old sweater. She looked young and lost. I didn't think you'd come today. Judge gave you 48 hours. I'm here to make sure you understand that. Lorna nodded. I'm packing. I'll be gone by tomorrow. Good. She walked into the living room and sat on the couch. Knox remained standing. Knox, I want to explain. No, please. Let me say this. We were going through a phase. I was confused. You didn't talk to me anymore. We barely saw each other. I felt invisible. Knox looked at her. I talked. You answered with locks. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. The affair, the eviction. My mother said, she said you needed to realize what you could lose. Your mother was wrong. Lorna started crying again. Can you forgive me? Can we try again? I'll go to counseling. I'll do whatever you want. Knox felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no pity. Just emptiness where his marriage used to be. 48 hours, Lorna. He walked to the door. Knox, wait. I loved you. Maybe I didn't show it, but I did love you. Knox stopped, but didn't turn around. Love doesn't change locks. He left her sitting on the couch, crying into her hands. 6 months later, Knox stood in his expanded training center. The court settlement had given him the capital to lease the space next door, buy proper equipment, hire 2 instructors. The center offered CPR certification, first aid training, trauma response courses, and a new program. Knox was particularly proud of a support group for men dealing with emotional abuse and manipulation. Ari had helped him design the program. A lot of men don't recognize what's happening to them, she'd explained. They think abuse is only physical. They don't understand that being manipulated, controlled, isolated, that's abuse too. Knox's first speaking engagement was at a conference in Denver. Standing at the podium, looking out at an audience of medical professionals, social workers, and counselors, he told his story. Emotional abuse doesn't leave bruises, he said. It doesn't send you to the emergency room, but it can destroy you just as completely as any physical violence. He talked about the patterns: isolation, financial control, manipulation, blame shifting. He talked about the importance of documentation, of having support systems, of recognizing that healing takes time. After his presentation, people approached him. A nurse whose wife had drained their savings account. A teacher whose husband had turned their children against him. A paramedic whose wife had convinced him he was worthless. Knox listened to their stories. He gave them Ari's contact information, invited them to the support group, reminded them that they weren't alone. The training center became known throughout Colorado Springs. Knox was invited to speak at more conferences, to consult on domestic abuse cases, to train other professionals. He bought a small house near the mountains. Nothing fancy, but it was his. He landscaped the yard himself, planted a garden, adopted a dog from the shelter, a German Shepherd mix named Scout. Knox still worked at the hospital, but only 3 days a week now. The training center provided enough income for him to be selective about his shifts, that he dated occasionally, but nothing serious. He'd learned to enjoy solitude, to find peace in his own company. The Whitmore family's reputation in Colorado Springs never recovered. News of the court case had spread through their social circle like wildfire. Cynthia found herself removed from the boards of 2 charities. Invitations to social events dried up. The story had become gossip fodder, how the wealthy family had tried to manipulate and discard their daughter's husband, that Kellen's business suffered too. Several clients canceled contracts, citing concerns about character and judgment. His golf buddies avoided him. The country club felt less welcoming. Lorna tried to start a lifestyle blog called Finding Myself After Mistakes. She posted about healing, growth, and second chances. The blog got 17 followers and folded after 2 months. West Temple moved on quickly. Knox heard through the hospital grapevine that he was dating a wealthy widow from Denver. One day, almost a year after the court case, Knox received a text from Lorna. I miss what we had. I was lost. I understand now what I did wrong. Can we talk? Knox read the message twice. Then he blocked her number. That he never heard from the Whitmore family again. Knox stood outside his training center in the early morning light. Spring had come to Colorado Springs. The mountains were green, the air was clean, and Scout was sniffing around the small garden Knox had planted in front of the building. Zia walked out carrying 2 cups of coffee. Another successful class last night, Zia said, handing Knox a cup. That group is really responding to the program. Knox nodded. The men's support group had grown to 12 regular members. They met every Thursday evening, sharing stories, supporting each other, learning to rebuild their lives. You did it, Zia continued. Cold, clean, and total. Knox sipped his coffee. It was never about revenge. It was about no longer explaining myself to people who never listened. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sunrise paint the mountains gold. Scout barked at a squirrel and chased it around the building. Knox's phone buzzed. A text from one of his former students. Used your trauma training yesterday. Saved a guy's life in a car accident. Thank you for teaching us to be ready. Knox smiled and put the phone away. This was better than revenge. This was purpose, The key no longer turned in the lock of his old life. But Knox had built new doors, new locks, new keys. And this time, only he decided who got in.